Here we go. So last time we were on Ger and Karuna Tildaka, lesson one. It's the reading, lesson two, first section of readings, reading three, the one beginning, Evam Eva Ko Bhikkhave. Yeah, welcome, Simon. I'll call it up on my screen. Let me just share screen. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, I pressed a wrong button, which means I turned off my camera. Sorry, let me just reactivate the camera. So I turned it off rather than minimizing it. Let me share screen. Screen one, share. So we had reached to the end of this one, Avijagata Samulha. I can't remember whether I mentioned last time in the initial TypeScript version that I did that I sent out. Oops. Stop. This satta I'd accidentally written with a short a at the end, satta. I can't remember whether I noticed it and mentioned it last time, but it should of course be satta with the long a, beings. So, appakate satta ye labhanti tathagatan dasanaya atako eteva satta bahutara ye nalabhanti tathagatan dasanaya. So, in exactly the same way, O monks, appakate satta, few are those beings. You can omit the equational verb to be few those beings, few are those beings. You can do it in English poetry as well. Long the road and dark the night, you see. Appakate sata, few are those beings who ye labhanti. Now labhanti, we know, labhati means to get or to obtain, but it's also used in Pali in the same way as we can say in English, if you get to do something. In other words, you manage to do something, or it so happens to your good fortune that you do it. So in English we'd say get to see. In Pali you say labhati, and then you'd use the dative form dasanaya. Would mean who are successful in seeing, or who have the good fortune to see. But if we translate as get to see, that has pretty much in English the same flavor as in the Pali. To get to see the Tathagata. Notice that the dasanaya, the verbal noun, this dative form of dasana, it's directly governed by labhanti. Labhanti dasanaya, they get to see. Just as a verb can take a direct object, so equally a verbal noun can take a direct object. Um, they obtain the seeing, we'd say the seeing of the Tathagata, but they obtain seeing the Tathagata is roughly how it goes here. So the Tathagatam in the accusative is treated as the direct object of the verbal noun, dasana. I think you are all fully familiar with the composition and reason for dasana, meaning seeing. How many lights do I see going on in faces? Is there anybody who'd like me to give a brief rundown of why it means what it is? Okay, so I will do so. Let me just uh, call up iPad. There we are. So the Vedic root drish means to see, and it makes a verbal noun. Well, there are two verbal nouns we'll talk about. It makes one of them is darshana, which is regularly formed. Drish darshana. Darshana means seeing, and it is dasana in Pali. Now, we're all familiar with the Pali for right view, or what is translated as right view, which is samaditthi. The formation of ditti is from the same root as darsana. So drish darsana also, as we know, an alternative way of forming a verbal noun is just by adding ti to the root. So drish, do it in Sanskrit first. Drish plus ti. Now, automatically in Sanskrit, where within a word you have a sh followed by a t, they automatically become retroflex. So drishti becomes drishti. So drishti, darshana and drishti in Sanskrit are just two words meaning seeing. They become slightly differentiated in Sanskrit as in Pali because darshana has tended to specialize itself into the meaning of seeing somebody, getting to see somebody physically, as in visiting, or just having sight of somebody. Also, it's the word meaning the word dasana in Pali also means vision. Um, Silena dassanena sampanno, for example, in the Karanea Metta Sutta, sampanno, endowed with silena dassanena, with virtue and vision. So just as darshana becomes dasana by regular phonetic mutation in Pali, so drishti becomes ditti. So that is our ditti in Pali, as in sammaditthi, right view. Will anybody tell me what the present tense is? He, she, it sees.
Pashyati.
Very good. Who? Finney got in there first. I know that Simon had it. Were you going to say the same, Simon?
Less Sanskritized Pashyati rather than Pashyate, but yes.
You were. Okay, right. So it's the same in Sanskrit and Pali. In Pashyati in Sanskrit, Pasati in Pali. It's one of those rare verbs where you actually use a completely different root in a different tense. And you've heard me say before, there are a couple of verbs in which we do the same in English. We use a different root. For example, our verb to go and past participle gone. For the past, we don't say goed, we say went. In other words, we use a completely different root. This is the same kind of phenomenon that you see happening here. So pashyati, passati, is the form of the verb that's almost invariable. Is it right to say invariably? Let's see, yeah, just say it is used. It's the form of the verb that's used for the present tense of drish. This is a bit of an entertaining etymology here. Vipassana, which is commonly translated, in fact, fairly accurately translated, as insight. Now, I'll give you a bit of, hopefully, some useful vipassana into the origin of this word, because it casts quite a light on the value of seeing the etymology and origins of these words. Yeah, welcome, Francis.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
Not to worry, not to worry. I'm just giving you some vipassana on the etymology and construction of the word vipassana, insight or insight.
Right, okay.
So we've just been looking at the root drish, ditti, dasana, and
Yeah.
which makes in the present tense passati, you use a different root. Now vipassana, there is actually a root, pash. Now the interesting thing is, in a very early stage of the language, there was an S in front of it. You do find this occasionally, an initial S coming and going. So there was the initial old Vedic root, spash, meaning to see. Now, look at this. We often find that if you have this palatized sh in Vedic, it often turns up in Greek and or Latin as a k sound. Favorite examples, of course, are the Sanskrit ashwa, meaning a horse, turns up in Latin as equus, equestrian, equine. Sometimes with a change of vowel. Sanskrit shunya, empty, turns up in Greek as kenos, meaning empty, hence cenotaph, empty tomb. Now, spash turns up in Latin as, oops, sorry, pen's going wrong. Try further down. It turns up in Latin as spec. There we are. There's our root meaning to see, to inspect, respect, spectacles. It's the same spec root we find in Vedic as spash. And when we say passati, you know that reflects, we say he specs something, spects something. But to expect is to look out for. Now, if you look at vipassana, which in Sanskrit would be vipashyana, we've got this prefix vi. Very, very common prefix in Sanskrit and Pali. Is there anybody who already knows it so well that they don't require an explanation of what it really means? And, okay, I'll take that as a no. It was originally this V. We often describe it as the separative prefix, meaning away or gone. If you are vigata midho in the Karanya Metta Sutta, your midha, your drowsiness is vigata, gone away. In other words, you are rid of drowsiness. It was originally, going back to Vedic times, it was originally a dwi, meaning, which is the number 2. And the idea was, the original primitive idea, the reason I'm laboring this point a bit is because it occurs in so many words, this prefix vi. And if you get to the bottom of the fundamental meaning, it will give life to these words. It originally meant 2, and the idea of splitting in 2. What was 1 is now 2, separate, apart. There's a survival of that in our modern English word widow. Somebody who's split away from being one of a pair, widow, separated from being 2, one of 2. So, curiously enough, as a number, it's retained that form with a dwa or a twa or a du in Latin, in Greek, in the Germanic languages, the Slavonic languages as well. Francis, I'm sure you've got enough Polish to tell us what the number 2 is in Polish.
Dwa.
Dwa.
Dwa, yes.
Okay, it's dwa with a dv. It's the same as the dvi, and in English we write it as två. We don't pronounce the W, we pronounce it as 2. But for example, in Swedish they say två with a t, German zwei. Now, what happened was, when this prefix dvi came to be, when the word dvi meaning 2 came to be used as a separative prefix, in Sanskrit and Pali, it lost the initial D, and so the D dropped, and it just becomes dvi. When it came into Latin, the opposite occurred. The V dropped, and it became die. Sorry, pen's going funny. Die. Also, variant forms. If this goes on, I have to bring my manual board again. D or dis.
It's yours, Cashin.
Yeah, it's yours.
No, it's yours.
You want the wrong phone? Do you want one or not?
No.
So our prefixes die, d, dis we can see they have the same kind of meaning as the V. It's the getting rid of something. Non, you can debug a computer. You defenestrate, throw somebody out of the window. You can respect and then disrespect. It's the idea of negating away from. Now, and sometimes it has the meaning of kind of looking within something. For example, when you dissect, when in a medical laboratory or a medical school, when you do a dissection, you aren't kind of randomly chopping things up. You're carefully cutting along to see what's inside. Now, if we create a new word from this spec, which is pash, we've just created a new word to dispect. So just as you dissect something, you cut so as you can see inside it. If you dispect something, which is now etymologically the exact etymological correlate of vipassana, which in Sanskrit, earliest Sanskrit would have been dvipashyana, dispection. That's the word that we used for insight. It's like a mental dissecting something, or looking not just at the surface of something, but looking into it. Oh, by the way, another very good example of the sh in Sanskrit becoming a k in Latin is the root nash, meaning to be destroyed, nasha, which would be nasa. It can also have the prefix v in front of it, suggesting the kind of falling apart, the utter the destruction and scattering part, the vinasa. We have at the end of one of our chants we have in a chant. Remind me, somebody, which one it is, of the also bad thing, including dusupinam, bad dreams, vinasam entu, may they go to destruction. So this root nas turns up in Latin as knock. The basic meaning is to harm. Knock as in noxious, a noxious substance. Also, knock as in innocens, which in English we have as innocent. So the word innocent literally means non-harm, somebody who has not caused harm. In other words, you haven't done anything wrong, innocent, non-harming. And I think, take advantage of Francis, is nosology, have I got this right, Francis? Nosology is the science of the classification of illnesses.
Yes, I think that's correct. Yes.
Right. So that's the case where the nos, the sh in Sanskrit, has turned up in Greek as the s. So the nos, the nosos, meaning the idea of illness. So nosology, as the classification of or the science of the classification of diseases. And one of my favorites, of course, I mentioned it earlier, is our cenotaph, which literally means the empty tomb, because it's a memorial to the dead, but without anyone. I'll be right back to you, Simon. A memorial to the dead, but nobody's actually buried there. And the seno, from the Greek keno, ultimately it's the same as the Sanskrit shunya and the Pali sunya, meaning empty. So it's where shunya, sunya, kenos, pronounced in anglicized Latin cenotaph, the shunyataph, the empty tomb. Simon, please.
I'm just wondering with Nash, destruction, and that the S turns into a hard K, whether that's the origin of the knacker's yard, where you take horses for destruction.
Ah, that's an interesting one. I wonder if it is. I'll check that and be back to you. Knacker's Yard. I mean, it sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds as if it could be, but hopefully I shall come back with good news on that one next time. So back to where we were. If I can find it. There we are. Okay, so all that arose out of the Dasanaya. So appakate sattaye labhanti tathagatang Dasanaya. Atako. Atta, literally here. Atako. And here, and look here, in this regard, in this respect. Eteva satta bahutara. This is ete. Written in full would be ete eva. The effect of eva would be, it is the, not just these beings, but ete eva satta. These are the beings who. It's just emphasizing this contrast. Apakate satta. Few are those beings. And then, sorry, here where we are. Eteva satta bahutara. But it is these beings who are more in number, ye nalabhanti tathagatam dasanaya. These beings are more who do not get to see the Tathagata. This bahu means many or much. With tara, it's a simple comparative form. Bahutara means more and can be more in as an uncountable or as a countable, more in quantity or more in number. They are more yena labhanti, who do not get.
James, it's Duncan.
Duncan.
Could you use majority there? Would that be too strong a translation for Bahutara?
Bahutara, those beings are in number. Yeah, you could. I mean, you could use it. Yeah, it would give exactly the same meaning. Those beings are more. Those beings are in the majority who do not get to see the Tathagata. The answer is yes. Yes, you certainly could.
Thank you.
I think I probably, and if I'd been writing a formal thing without thinking about the Pali, I probably would have used a word like majority. But I was funneled back into the simpler language here just to stick closely to the Pali. But yes, I mean, your point is exactly right. Notice that this bahu has an alternative form, much of bahula. And you find bahula, for example, bahu, let me call up iPad again. So bahu, and then with the same meaning, bahula, meaning much. Note that where a word is compounded with the root kri or bhu or a derivative of them, it often changes the last vowel to an E. So kata, Sanskrit krita, means done or made. And you often see, we have it in our chants, so we don't say bahula kata, but because it's compounded, it becomes bahuli kata. And we see it in our chants, tathagatena bhavito bahulikato, or these practices, this silam, this virtue has been bhavitam, developed, bahulikatam, literally made much practiced. I forget which line of which chant it comes in, but it's in our regular chants. Simon.
It's in the Bojangas. But two questions about this. With Bahula, you don't get comparatives. So you don't get Bahulatara or something similar, do you?
I don't recall ever having seen it. I think Bahula is an alternative form of the kind of non comparative. Let me just double check that so I'm not misleading you. Bahulatara. It's kind of thing. If you said it, you would certainly be understood, but I don't think it's actually said.
And the other one was, is there a rule for when you would use bio instead for more, greater? Is that just for size, or can you have quantity, like more of something? Presumably they're from the same base, aren't they? From bu, like more, being more.
It is, yes, it is. And it behaves a bit irregularly because we have the ba, ha, as two separate syllables, whereas in bhuyas and bhiyo most, they kind of merge together into an aspirated bh. Okay, here we are. Slightly misbehaving again because it's here we are. Subahala. Usually that means usually only and compound. Okay. Then we see the bahuli in combination with kar, bahuli kata, made much of, and then kind of done much, done frequently, done often. Described in the, for example, in the Buddha's the way he taught things, bahuli katam, taught much.
Can it mean both, like done frequently, done much, or karoti in the sense of making, make much of? Is it subject or object there? Bahuli kata, is that you do it a lot, or you make it into something big, like bruheti?
Do you know, I wonder whether they went through that same mental process, Simon, when they were analyzing that word in their own speech. I hadn't looked at it in that way. It's difficult to say. Did it a lot, made much of it, did it frequently. They will have slightly different tones in English, but I think the bahulikata was, I think the idea here is, it wasn't just occasionally as a passing thing. It was kind of a central point. He was always on about it or frequently on about it. Whether we can actually come back to your question, whether we can seriously make a distinction between frequently and much. that may be because the two alternative ways of expressing it in English invite that question, but the way of expressing it in Pali, I'm not sure does. Do you know, I might even have to duck out of that question. I might even have to. I'm going to make a note of it and see if I can say anything more sensible next time round. But if I try to go any further on that, I'd just be blathering on even more than usual to no great purpose.
I wouldn't want you to make too much of it.
Bahulikaram nakarumi. I will not make any bahulikara of it. So before we move on, oops, are there any queries arising out of this line? Queries or comments?
But James,
Anne.
I'm still, well, not about this line, but about that word vipassana. When you explained the VI
Yes.
as apart or leaving, I couldn't see how that then led to the translation of insight.
Ah, okay, right. The idea here, I mean, the imagery in my mind, I'd welcome any other ideas, is that a pure pasana, a pure seeing, is you're seeing the surface of something. You can see it. Vipassana, the imagery that's been in my mind, and you're right to raise this because I didn't make this explicit earlier. It's the idea of separating, you're like separating the veil, pulling the veil apart, separating the surface to look into something. In the same way as dissecting, you're kind of cutting it open. If you're dissecting, you're cutting open, dissecting, you're seeing it open. So opening up the surface and seeing inside under the surface. I mean that's the imagery that's been in my mind. But if anyone else has any better imagery, please let me know.
Well, I learned it to mean extraordinary seeing.
Well,
seeing in.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't quarrel with the underlying meaning of it, but as you know, in these classes, we anchor ourselves very firmly back to the actual language. So there's nothing in the word itself. Although I mean, I can't dispute that English rendering of it. It is one way of expressing what vipassana is or produces. But there's nothing in the Pali word itself that says extraordinary, for which there is. But the actual, if you look at the root meaning, the raw root meaning of that word, it is like seeing into, separating the veil, splitting apart, the dissecting for the dispecting, the cutting it open in order to see inside.
So you could say parting, like apart, but parting.
Parting the veil.
Parting.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
You could. With my usual caution, Anne, that we just use we use the medium of English just as aids to understanding what the Pali really means from the inside. But yes, you're parting the veil. You're like opening the curtain to see inside. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Simon.
Yeah, on the point about Vipassana, you get some people who say that the V is used purely as an intensifier. So it's some kind of deep seeing or, a special seeing or a seeing that can actually see into things. And this, I think, is from the the expansive sense of the, apart means it gets bigger.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's very hard to find any verb where it is unambiguously just an intensifier. Because if you have things like vimutti, which completely freed, but it's freed away from something.
Exactly so. There have been there've been plenty of cases where the suggestion is well the V is used as an intensifier, and as best I recall, I could be wrong about this, but as best I recall, in every single case where you look at the V, it really does add something to the meaning, not just an intensifier, but it adds a kind of dynamism up and away. The example that you've given. Vimutti. Mutti means setting free, literally, from the root much. The original idea was, like a bird held in the hand. You set it free. And you're right with the vimutti. It has this dynamic effect, like up and away, not only set free, but then flying away from its cage, flying away from that bondage.
Even the vipassana with the double N, that they're kind of completely settled, has got the sense of settled out, hasn't it? Kind of settled away from the muck, as in placidity and so on.
In fact, I'm glad you raised that, because you beat me to it by about two seconds there. That very word. Does anyone know the significance of vipassanani, meaning, we'll discuss the meaning of them, but vipassanani was the very first human word that was said to the Buddha after his enlightenment. You remember that, when he was on his way to find his the gang of five, his five old fellow ascetics. While he was on his way, he met the wanderer Upaka. And you know the story well, Francis, because I've heard you telling it at one of our meetings in Manchester 2 or 3 years ago. You said when the Buddha was walking to meet his five mendicants, five former friends in the ascetic life, he met the wanderer Upaka, who said, Vipassanani, not just passanani, Vipassanani kote avuso indriyani, which means like bright and clarified, O friend, are your senses. And pasanna has the idea of, it's a very good example that Simon has just raised. Pasanna, the noun pasada, adjective pasanna, the original meaning of it is something where the muck has settled to the bottom of the water. You've got water with all the mud stirred up in it. If you let it settle, then it is pasanna, in Sanskrit prasanna, sat through. In fact, settle and sanna, sad, from the same root, sit. So the mud has settled to the bottom. So you talk about a pool, the water in a clear pool, as being pasanna. Means there may be mud at the bottom of the pool, but the mud is pasanna, settled to the bottom. Now, if you can use that word with a vi, is that purely intensive? It becomes vipassana. Some people have said it is, but I don't think so at all. I think, Simon, also you got the right idea, that the mud is not only pasanna, but vipassana, settled and removed. In other words, there's not even any mud left at the bottom anymore. So all these meanings, and quite powerful meanings, are contained within these prefixes.
I've been trying to think what might be, uh, how it might be used as an intensifier when it can't possibly mean apart. And
Okay, if you carry on with what Upaka said, you find the answer there.
can't remember, but I've just trying to think it through logically. What about joining? There's definitely vibandhana, to tightly bind together, and also viniyoga.
So you've got Vipa yoga, but what's Viyoga?
It's viniyoga,
Oh, Viniyoga. Okay.
which it couldn't really be kind of directive. It couldn't be something apart, could it? Tearing or taking something apart.
I'm going to have to. Oops. So I've lost my page.
But the main one would be, I'm not even sure about Viniyoga. I think it exists, but Vibandhana does. I've seen that somewhere. That's in the Dhammapada somewhere.
So which one?
Vibandhana.
Vibandhana.
Yeah, as in to tie tightly or to bind very tightly. Bandhanam.
I had spotted that one because initially looking at that word bandhana, which is binding, and the band is the same as our English word bind and a band. But vibandhana suggests unbinding, loosing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Suggests.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's what it means. I thought it
Yeah.
meant bind tightly.
I'm just going to check it right now. The vibandha, one meaning is a fetter.
Yeah, that's odd, isn't it? That would be against it being separative.
It would, yeah. Hang on. Vibandha, fetter, yeah. Okay, this I can say no more than this looks like a bit of an exception to the rule. That it does not seem to have the separative meaning here. Unless, of course, I mean, I don't know how artificial it is. Maybe the bandha binds you so as it keeps you away from doing anything else. But my first reaction to that is that that's a little bit of an artificial interpretation.
Also above it, if that's a list of the or the main part, and the is a suffix. Sorry, if you go back again just a bit.
Okay, okay. Here we are. Look, we've got in this, and we've got the PTS dictionary on screen in an intensifying sense.
Is the one sahati there? If you go down a bit. Yeah,
To have
the sahati.
Yeah.
Separative. It might be expansive in the sense of, if you separate it out, the meaning then becomes very much so broadly rested. So
Yes, yeah.
Everywhere, rested in all.
So intensifying sense, mostly with terms expressing per se one of the other of the shades of meanings. So as an intensive, but not freely used, as an intensive, but provided there is also an associated meaning that could be the idea of separation or away. And one of these is yoga joining viyoga. You can also have vipa yoga, as in piyehi vipayogo dukho, as in our chant of the regular evening, morning chant, for example. Piyehi vipayogo, separation from the loved, is dukkha. But where you have so it has an intensive, but also with this probably never quite losing the underlying meaning of separation or out or expansion. For the good Upaka, the first human being to have spoken to the Buddha of the Enlightenment, he starts off there saying, Vipassanani koteabusu indriyani. Quite purified, O friend, are your indriyani, your literally senses, faculties. And he goes on to say, now using a pari, the prefix pari, which on its own strictly means about or around. It's cognate with the Greek peri, meaning around, which we well known in English as peri, around, perimeter, the around measure, the boundary around land. In medical terms, the pericardium is the membrane. Just watching Francis here, see if I get it right. The pericardium literally means around the heart. It's a membrane that surrounds the heart, and there it has its exact meaning of around. But peri, which is pari in Sanskrit and Pali, does very frequently have a purely intensive meaning with no sense of around, because the good Upaka went on to say, Parisuddhate Chavivanno. Suddha means pure or clean. Originally meant bright, then came to mean pure or clean. But Parisuddho, quite pure, is your Chavivanno. Literally, your literally skin color means your complexion, like the radiance of your complexion. Pariyudato, literally completely washed, meaning kind of pure and bright, pure and spotless is your complexion. But there, pari, I think, can have only this in intensive meaning. Oops. I just noticed before we leave this page, viramati. Ramati here means to rest or to pause or to stop. Viramati means completely desist from, and it makes a verbal noun in, I'm sure everyone here has chanted it 1,000 times, Veramani. Panatipata Veramani Sikhapadam Samadhiyami. So from viramati, to desist from, to completely leave off doing something. So viramati would be the present tense, veramani, the slightly irregularly formed verbal noun, veramani. So before we move on, any further comments or queries? Right, the next one. Evaneva bhikkhave appakate satta ye labhanti tathagata paveditam dhamma vinayam savanaya. Atako eteva satta bahutara ye nalabhanti tathagata paveditam dhamma vinayam savanaya. So just a couple of differences in vocabulary from the previous one. This paveditam proclaimed or made known. The root here is our well-known vid, which means it's a combination of meaning to see or to know. It's the one I've said many times. It's the one that turns up in Latin as videre, video, vision, provide, and so on. and it also meaning that in Latin it's come to have more the meaning of seeing. Through the Germanic line and into English, it's come to us as wit, meaning wit in the sense of knowing. In German, wissen. You do something unwittingly, is unknowingly. Pervedita, so the causative form of the root vid is vedayati or vedeti, to make known. And with the prefix pa, in Sanskrit pra, in Sanskrit pravedayati, to make known, but with this dynamic prefix pra, meaning out or forth. So he made it known as like broadcasting, spreading, proclaiming. So past participle here, paveditam, proclaimed, made known, expansively made known. The double P there, on its own, it would just be at the beginning of a word group, just paveditam. But in Sanskrit, it's got a pra, the consonant cluster, so it kind of wants to double if it gets the opportunity, and here it does have the opportunity because it's in a compound with a preceding short vowel. So on its own, paveditam dhamma vinayam, but within a compound with a preceding vowel, tathagata paveditam. So Tathagata proclaimed means proclaimed by the Tathagata. So Savanaya, it's the same dative of a verbal noun as in dasanaya. Labhanti dasanaya, they get to see. Labhanti savanaya, they get to hear, which hasn't the idea of they have the opportunity to listen. From this root, through, okay, we're just up to 4 o'clock. What I'll do, I will look at this root shru, and it's very important derivatives, doctrinal derivatives, as it were, in Sanskrit and Pali. So we'll take a break now, and I'll see you all here at 4:15.
And stop recording.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Yes. Pause record. 4:15 again. There we are. Yeah, before the break, I mentioned this, the root shuru. Trying to find my iPad. Oh. Here we are. So the Vedic root shru, meaning to hear. We find it in quite a number of common derivatives in Pali. It forms its past participle regularly just by adding ta to the root. So, looking at Sanskrit now. So, shruta is heard, that which is heard, which in Pali becomes sutta by regular phonetic mutation. And that's what we see at the beginning of many suttas. Evam maya suttam, literally, thus by me heard. Commonly translated as that thus have I heard. One who hears is, oops, sorry, pen's going funny again, is a Shravaka. Shravaka, literally a hearer, and that is the one that by, again, regular phonetic mutation turns up as Savaka in Pali, as in Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho. Well practiced is the Savaka Sangha, literally the Sangha of hearers, literally, it means in the sense disciples. And in the text that we've just been looking at, in Sanskrit, Shravana, just the act of hearing, and in Pali, Savana. So, Nalabhanti Dhamma Vinayam Sapanaya, they do not get to hear the Dhamma and the Vinaya. Incidentally, if you are Bahu Shruta, again, we've got this Bahu, much. If you are much heard, it's the equivalent of being learned. In English, we talk about somebody being well read. Was back in the days when most teaching was oral. You were not well read, but you were well heard. You've heard lots of teaching. So Bahushruta. And in Pali, where's my pen doing this? Come on, pen. Sorry about that. See if it will. My pen is beginning. Okay. So Bahushruta in Sanskrit, much heard, that becomes Bahusutta in Pali. We sometimes see that in describing people as being very learned in the doctrine. Bahusutta. Simon, please.
It's also changes to Bahusatcha, doesn't it? Which is kind of confusing because you think it's got something to do with the truth, but it hasn't. But what I wanted to ask is why, if sutta means heard, the object that you hear, the person who is Bahusutta isn't much heard, they've heard much. It's the other way around. How does that work?
There are actually two alternative explanations for that. There is a small but important category of past participles. So the normal past participle of a transitive verb is passive. Something has been done to it. The words have been heard. Something has been obtained. But there's some of these past participles actually have an active meaning. One is prapta. Sorry, this is really playing up now. Sorry. So prapta, literally obtained, something has been obtained. That's from our root up. Oh, it's gone blue now. Come on. So prapta, something has been obtained. And that's the one that becomes prapta becomes patta in Pali. Mostly used as a pure passive, but it's sometimes used as an active. We've got it in one of our chants. Pattanupatti in one of our Pattanupatti Dhammatam. They are Patta Anupatti Dhammata, means they have obtained the nature not to arise again. In other words, they're in their last life. So Patta, you'd expect that Patta would mean something has been obtained, but it can sometimes have a passive form, somebody who has obtained. And if you are Bahushruta, it's the same. You are one who has heard much. There is an alternative explanation which makes Bahushruta, a possessive compound. One who's heard, in other words, what that person has heard is much. Who possesses much of what has been heard. I think the first explanation is probably more correct, but the other one is also plausible. As for the form that you gave us, Simon, which was Bahusatcha. Is it with a double S? It should be Bahusatcha. Yeah, I think it is. Okay, this is one of those what we call vriddhi derivatives. We haven't really been into vriddhi derivatives in detail, but goodness me, they're such fun. I can see the shiver of terror when I talk when I talk about a bit of grammar that's much fun. What happens is that you get. Let's do it in Sanskrit first. It makes it easy. If you're Bahushruta, which is a compound adjective, you can make an abstract noun out of it, the quality of having heard much. One of the ways of doing it is to strengthen the first syllable, so ba, and changing the last a syllable to a ya. So Bahushruta, straight compound adjective, much heard, one who has heard much, therefore learned. Abstract noun, Bahushrutya in Sanskrit, that's the one that becomes Bahusatcha. It's just the abstract noun, the state or condition of having heard much. But this is a particularly complicated word to use as an example. The best and easiest example, and we see it a lot in Pali, we all know the word kusala, commonly translated as skillful, as in skillful acts on the path. We'll do it in Sanskrit and Pali. So kushala in Sanskrit, kusala in Pali. Many of you may have come across the abstract noun of it, which is kosala, skillfulness. Kosala. How the kosala arise? What happens is you take the first syllable, you strengthen, talking about Sanskrit now, you strengthen the first syllable, strengthen the vowel u to au, as in bahu, ku, kau, and the final a becomes ya. So kushala, kaushalya is a regular formation in Sanskrit. And then by standard phonetic mutation, kusala, kusalla in Pali.
But Bahusatcha doesn't look right. I think it's only got one S.
One S.
Mm.
Okay, okay? It jolly well ought to have two. And the reason I say it jolly well ought to have two, because it's a consonant cluster. It's a shra in Sanskrit, which would normally resolve into a double S in Pali if preceded by a vowel. But it doesn't always happen. And it's a little bit irregular, a little bit random in Pali, whether it doubles or not. This actually is a point I wanted to ask you all. It's a matter of what you're used to hearing. It's the fifth of the 5 precepts. Suramerya Majjapamata Thana Veramani Sikhapadang Samadhiyami. Sura Merya Majjapamadhatthana. I'll just write that section of it. Now, Sura Merya Majja, various types of alcoholic drinks, or intoxicating substances anyway. Pramadhatthana in Sanskrit, pramada sthana. Sthana meaning literally a place. It's just the verbal noun of the root sta, to stand. So sthana is a place. In fact, cognate with the in modern times, the endings stan for Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan is the same stan, the place. But here it means the occasion of something happening. So the occasion for pramada, for heedlessness to arise. And what's happened here? We've got, in Sanskrit, it begins with a consonant cluster, sta, pramada sthana. And sure enough, sthana normally is just tana in Pali on its own, tana, but in a compound with a preceding short vowel, it doubles again, pramadasthana, pramadakana. So far, so good, and that's fairly regular. Now, my question collectively to you is this. First of all, as a statement, in all of the versions I've seen of the 5 precepts, this P is written as a single P. But that worries me. It ought to be a double P, because in Sanskrit it is pramada. So you'd expect it to see in Pali, because in Sanskrit it would be madhya pramada. So in Pali you'd expect madhya pramada with a double P. But I've never seen it written with a double P. However, and here's the twist, I've heard several people making it a double P, or slightly pausing before the P, as if they know it's meant to be doubled, even though it's not double in our chanting book. Francis, among the company assembled here, you are probably the one who has chanted these precepts more than anyone else here, maybe even more than the rest of us put together. How would you chant the 5th precept, the one about in drinks that substances that cloud the mind?
I was trying to think, but Merya Majjapamadhatthana. Yes, there is a slight pause almost before the first P.
Yeah, I think we kind of.
But maybe I'm being led on by you.
Okay, having put the question in that way, of course,
Yes,
that makes
yeah.
it what the scientists would call an unfair test, because I
Yes,
already put it into your mind. We've skewed the results. But if there is a groundswell movement to chant it as a double P, I'll be with you on the barricades fighting for that movement, because I see no reason why it shouldn't be. And so often I've been listening out. I've been listening out for people much more since I started thinking about this over the last few months. And there is a pause and almost a doubling of the P.
it is actually the natural place to breathe in, which then makes it a bit easier to have two P's. Yeah. So
That's a good, yeah, that's actually a good point, because this is the longer in terms of syllables. It's the longest of the five, so it's a bit natural to have a pause. Let's all carry on listening and see if we can have any insights. Is there anybody else who would deliberately chant it with a double P? Surameri Majapamata Kana. Would you, Simon?
It kind of comes out that way. I've just picked it up, but I mean, funny little things creep in, like the double M in the beginning, Namo Tassa, Namo Tassa. That's really weird. Where does that come from?
Okay. That's not actually a doubling of the M. That's a glottal stop. Namo.
Shouldn't be there though, should it?
It shouldn't. I'm glad you've raised that point. It is okay. It is peculiarly a feature imported from the native phonetics of Thai. So it's when you never hear the Sri Lankans chanting like that. You'd never hear an Indian chanting like that. In many words in Thai, although it's not even written in the script, where you get a short vowel followed by a single consonant. It's not a consonant cluster, followed by a long vowel. This glottal stop sometimes slips in. And it's a regular part of the phonetics of specifically of Thai. And sometimes you will hear some. In fact, you also hear in the very precept that we're looking at here, not surah but surah. Just a few weeks ago, I was listening to Thai monks chant. It was surah, surah. There was that glottal stop was there, just there. So anyway, please regard it as just an importation from the phonetics of Thai, and I'll definitively say it is alien to the phonetics of the languages of northern India. I'm not sure what the Burmese do. I'll see if I can find a chant done by Burmese. So I said this, the Sri Lankans don't, and in Indians don't. I mean, there's no glottal stop in this kind of location in the northern Indian languages anyway. I have heard one explanation that is for emphasis. As I can come on, no, okay, I think that's a complete non-starter. But I've heard maybe I forget who it was from, maybe from Rob Atkins. I'll just have to double check with him that the Thais explain it as if the Thais are aware that that's not how it would have been chanted in the land of the Buddha, but it's treating us as kind of cutting. We're cutting ourselves off from our previous trains of thought and our just way of being, and we're starting our ceremony more tassa. We're cutting off from where we were before. Now homage to the Buddha. I could have two hats on here, with a strictly academic linguistic hat on. I would say that is a very lovely invention by the Thais, but doesn't have any linguistic justification for it. But if that's how they perceive it, as you know, as the centuries go by, people create their own understanding of their language. I would say it's fanciful, but okay, so be it. But you wouldn't find it justified by historical linguistics.
I've just been sort of riffling through the chanting book, and it strikes me that when you have a compound word beginning with a P and they've separated it with a dash, you never see the P doubled. Maybe they think we can't say a double P.
Hang on.
Well, can you think of a word in a chant that I can look for?
Are you looking at our Samatha chanting book?
Yes.
Hang on, what I will do, Sarah, rather than spend time going through the book now, I will just check that point. I have a feeling that you do find it.
I can find words with double P's in, but not separated by dashes.
Okay. Well, for example, Pamadatana. Okay, that's a double T there. The same principle applies.
Yeah, but I just can't see it with the P.
Okay. I'm going to double check this point, and come back to you next time. I'm just making a note now that you've raised this point. Perhaps we could all have a go, because you should all have the PDF version. I mean, it's publicly available. Our PDF version of the Samatha chanting book, which is it's although PDF, it is an electronically searchable PDF. So there should be a fairly simple search, -double P. Are there any instances of it? But interesting point then, Sarah. Of course, we got the word from the negation of pamada is apamada with a double P, but of course that wouldn't be hyphen, because the negating is an integral part of the word now. Anyway, hopefully I'll be able to come back with more on this next time round.
James, in the verse that we just read, the Tathagata -double P-A Veditam, there's a hyphen, but are you saying that if it's a chant versus a recitation, that's they drop a double P?
I deny saying it is Sarah. Sarah was saying it. You're right, actually, here we are. Yeah, the verse we've just been looking at. Let me call it up. Is it gone? Here we are. Yeah, I'm highlighting the words here. Tathagata paveditam. If you see where I've highlighted here, because in Sanskrit, Tathagata praveditam, and then Anne's point, if we were chanting it, would it still be there? I'm a little bit dubious about what you've said, Sarah, but anyway, I'm going to check it, and maybe you will as well in the interim before we next meet. But looking at this phrase, the one that Anne has just pointed out, Tathagata paveditam, that is normal as I would expect to see it. You're looking as if you're about to say something, Sarah, or is that just my imagination?
I I have just done the search in the chanting book and it hasn't come up with any.
Ooh.
But that might be my computer. It's struggling a bit.
Okay. So curiouser and curiouser, said Alice. But anyway, I will check, and of course you're all welcome to check. Please do, and we'll swap notes next time. By the way, is there anybody who has not got the PDF version of the chanting book? I mean, it's something that's very useful to have on computer. That is searchable. You can find any word there. In case there's anybody who doesn't, and this also for everyone else who receives them, I'll include a copy of it, or just I'll attach it to my next email just to make sure that everyone does have it. So back to where we were. Atakuiteva sata bahutara, more numerous, or the majority are those beings, ye nalabhanti, who do not get savanaya to hear, to the hearing of the Dhamma Vinaya Tathagata Paveditam, made known, proclaimed by the Tathagata. Incidentally, Vinaya, here we do have a fairly clear separative meaning of our prefix vi. The root of Vinaya is oops. What's happening here? I've accidentally lost the connection. Here we are. The root is ni, meaning to lead. It makes an agent noun, leader, Nayaka. In fact, in our chant of the 28 Buddhas, I forget which one it is, but the word Nayako appears there. Somebody, Nayako, leader. Former president of Sri Lanka, Bandaranayaka, Bandara meaning a monkey, Bandaranayaka, the monkey leader. That's from the Ramayana. The Bandaranayaka was the monkey chief who led the troop of monkeys over the sea to Sri Lanka to recapture, to rescue Sita. It makes a verbal noun, naya. One of the ways of making verbal noun is naya, meaning leading, and the vinaya, the vinaya, which we know is the code of monastic discipline, literally means that which leads the way. In other words, it leads wrongdoing and evil away from you, or leads you away from wrongdoing. It's the idea of it guides you away from the paths of wrongdoing. The phrase Dhamma Vinaya here is a dvandva. Just means a twin compound, just putting two nouns together instead of and. It would have been equally correct to say Tathagata Paveditam Dhammang Vinayancha. Dhamman, declining both nouns fully. Dhamman Vinayancha, the Dhamma and the Vinaya. But you just put them together, what's known as a dvandva, which just means a double. So a doubling compound. But in English, we just put an and in between. Simon.
With Tathagata Paveditam, have you provided the hyphen to make it easier? I mean, is it a proper compound in the sense of being a tapurisa, so kind of made known by the Tathagata?
Yes, I'm actually very strict about that, strict with myself. But I would only use a hyphen if, according to the grammar of the original, be it Sanskrit or Pali, it is strictly speaking a compound. But you can, but so yes, it is a compound here. Simon, how would you separate the compound?
What do you mean, how would I separate it?
Okay. Tathagata Paveditam is literally Tathagata taught, if we translate word by word, and we can retranslate that as taught by the Tathagata. So if you separate the compound, it means you take out Tathagata and you decline it as a separate word. You, as it were, decompound it.
Would that be dative?
No, it would be instrumental because it's the Paveditam by the Tathagata.
So it's Tathagataya or
Tathagatena.
Tena, okay.
Yeah. So here, if instead of Tathagata Paveditam, you could equally correctly say, separating out the compound, Tathagatena Paveditam, declining Tathagata in full. So you can do that, and equally correctly, you can just make a compound, in which case you no longer decline the first element. It's just Tathagata Paveditam. Now, there's a special name for these compounds. The compounds have their names in Sanskrit and Pali. This would be called an instrumental compound. And it would be called an instrumental compound because if you separate out the first member, the Tathagata would go in the instrumental, Tathagatena Paveditam. Have you got the point? And this one, Dhamma Vinayam, I think I'm almost certain they just call this, it would just be a nominative compound, essentially meaning that take the word out, leave it on its own, it's A plus B, both would be in the same case.
The two types of compound, aren't they? The first one looks to me like a tapurisa, but the second one...
The plot thickens. Okay, the plot thickens. There are several types of compound. This is, this would be the determinative compound, tapurisa. Determinative means, okay, paveditam, taught. Then you might say, okay, expand, define more, taught to whom, by whom, on what occasion, say more about taught. Okay, taught by the Buddha. So you determine in the sense of you limit the meaning down to specifically taught by the Tathagata. So it is an instrumental tapurisa compound, if you want to get really technical, Simon, which I know you like doing, quite rightly, same as me. It's an instrumental tapurisa compound.
The other one...
In Sanskrit, so it would be called a third case, Tritiya Vibhakti Tatpurusha Samasa, it would be called.
The other one is just a dvanda, isn't it? It's Dhamma and Vinaya.
Exactly so, yeah. So there's no case relationship between it's A and B. If you separate them out, they just be in the same case. There's no dependency one upon the other. There's no dependency of case. For example, take the compound dukkha nirodha, the ending of suffering. Okay, also a tatpurusa, nirodha, ending, specify, determine, ending of what? What kind of ending? Dukkha nirodha, okay, ending of suffering, the suffering ending. But this is now, it's a genitive tatpurisa, because if you separated the compound out, it would be dukkhasa nirodha. Is that clear? Dukkhasa nirodha. Now, dukkhasa nirodha gamini patipada, the path that leads to the end, or goes, gamini, that goes to the end of suffering. This is now dukkha nirodha gamini has got three members there, three members of the dukkha nirodha gamini. So dukkha nirodha is, as it were, a bracketed compound within a compound. So dukkha nirodha gamini. So dukkha nirodha is a genitive compound because it would be dukkhasa nirodha. But now gamini going to, that becomes now an accusative compound because dukkha nirodham, gamini going to dukkha nirodham. Dukkha nirodham, gamini. That would be the genitive of motion. Gamini going, dukkha nirodham, to the end of suffering. So there we've got a genitive compound, dukkha nirodha, which itself is a submember of the larger compound, dukkha nirodha gamini.
Could that not also be kammadharya, in the sense that gamini is going and you're qualifying the going?
There are somewhere it actually could be either. My natural inclination would be to treat it as tapurisa, going where. I probably could, with a little bit of effort, persuade myself to agree that it's a kammadharya compound. But my instinct is to regard it as a tapurisa. Kammadharya compound. Does anyone know what a kammadharya compound is? It's where the first word is kind of descriptive of the same. A very good example of a kammadharya compound in English is a blackbird. Okay, so it's a bird, specific kind of bird, a blackbird, but the word black is directly descriptive of the kind of bird. So that is kammadharya. It might be as well at some stage to have a good proper session on the compounds. Incidentally, there are many areas of Pali study where, in fact, the best explanations are given in the Sanskrit grammars. For example, if I were going to introduce the question of compounds, there is a particular Sanskrit grammar that I would start using simply because it's so well explained, and secondly because there is no observable distinction between the way compounds are formed in Sanskrit and the way they're formed in Pali. But that will be for another time. And compounds can be a bit tricky. Now, to determine what kind of compound it is. Just as in English, it can be a little bit tricky. There's an example I've given before. Well, that if you so logically, say a ticket machine is a machine that sells tickets. Does it therefore follow that a railway station is a station that sells railways? Well, no, no, sorry, it doesn't quite work like that. We've got our intuition about how these compounds are used. But as I say, more on that as we go. Incidentally, this Tathagata Paveditam, this Tathagata Paveditam Dhammavinayam Savanaya could all have been put into one long compound. It sounds a little bit heavy. It could be Tathagata Pavedita Dhammavinaya Savanaya. It would be permissible within the rules of the language to put this all as one long compound. And in many cases, it's entirely optional in the hands of the writer or speaker whether he compounds words or separates them out. So before we move on, are there any comments or queries? Yes, Simon.
Just on that last point you made, that could be one long compound. If you made it into that, would you have to get rid of the case endings on things? Would it be Tathagata Pavedita Dhamma Vinaya Savanaya, or can you keep the endings?
You would. In fact, when I said the compound out loud, then maybe it didn't come very clearly over the airwaves, but you would lose the case endings, and it would be written like this. Tathagata Pavedita Dhamma Vinaya Savanaya.
And that's the case for all types of compounds, including the Dvanda.
Essentially, yes. Essentially, yes. However, remember, there are some compounds where you do slightly anomalously decline the non-final member. I'll give you a couple of examples. A very well-known word is manasikara, a word very frequently used by the Buddha when telling people to pay attention. Yoniso manasikarota, mark well, pay attention well. Look at that. Manasi is a locative, manasikara, placing in the mind. You would expect to see something like manokara or manakara, but it's the locative, manasikara. This is one of those cases, a minority of cases where you have the middle or a non-final member declined within the compound. Another one is the Buddha taught the doctrine that is, lovely in the beginning, lovely in the middle, lovely in the end. It is the Dhamman Adi Kalyanam Majhe Kalyanam Pariyusana Kalyanam. Literally, beginning lovely, Adi Kalyanam, middle lovely, Majhe Kalyanam, ending lovely, Pariyusana Kalyanam. Look at the Majhe, we don't say Majha Kalyanam, though normally you would expect to see Majha Kalyanam, middle beautiful, namely beautiful in the middle, but that is declined there as Majhe Kalyanam. And I've never seen it written, that I recall, as Majha Kalyanam. It's become a kind of a stock phrase. And you occasionally find it also with the accusative. some of you may have come across Ajahn Jutindaro, who used to be at Chithurst, then moved to set up a small monastery in Devon. That is Juti, light, Dharo, the holder of light. So you would expect to see Jutidharo. But in fact, the light holder, what happens in his name is that the accusative ending m is so Jutimdharo becomes Jutimdharo. So that's what's known as a declined compound. You see it also in words like Arindama, the tamer of enemies, the subduer of enemies. Ari, enemy, Dhamma, tamer, Arindama, enemy tamer, with the accusative there, Arimdama, Arindama. You very often find that where you have a short vowel followed by a D or a T. Just it sounds better. Aridama, Arindama, Jutidharo, Jutindharo. It just flows better. But these are known as declined compounds. For those of you who want to know the word for declined compound, the word for declension, by the way, in Sanskrit, the pen's gone funny. It's given me a dotted line. Come on. I don't know why it's done that. There we are, that's better. Vyaya means Pali Vaya. We know the word Vyaya, Pali Vaya. It means going away, disappearing. Vaya Dhamma Sankhara. Sankhara compounded things up. Vaya Dhamma. They have the nature to pass away. It is Vi with our separative, Aya, literally go away, to fade away. In fact, this is the first word of the very last sentence that the Buddha ever said. Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Samadena Sampadeta. Interestingly, Vyaya means going away or falling off. Why does it also mean declining, as in declining a noun with its endings? Well, if you look at I don't know, I haven't actually researched this. If you look at the word we use, something can decline in the sense it loses its force, loses its power, it dies. And equally, we decline the nouns and adjectives. We run through them with their declensional ending. So curiously enough, and I haven't worked out why yet, using the same word decline, meaning to fade away, and to give the declensional endings, they do exactly the same in Sanskrit and Pali, the vaya, vyaya, declining, declension. So in Sanskrit, a compound, samasa is a compound, and a vyaya samasa is a compound where the non-final member does actually have a declensional ending, as in Jutindaro, Majhe Kalyano, Manasikarota, Manasikara. Simon.
I thought you said before about Vaya, had not so much of going away, but coming apart, as in they rise, Udaya, whatever it is, and then Vaya, they kind of float up and go pop, so they come apart. It's about decay rather than departure.
Oh, sorry. Okay, fine. So the VAR, so to go, you actually go apart. I should rather have said rather than go away. However, in vigata, using the other word for going, if you are vigata midho, if you're midha, your drowsiness is vigata. That does mean it has gone. Maybe it has gone pop, but that is it's gone away. You've got rid of your middha.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that Vigata and what is the other? There's another 81. I can't remember what it is now, but they have the sense of like going away, departing, leaving. But Vaya has the sense of the bits of it leave one another. It just bursts, it decays, it falls apart, doesn't go away from you. It comes away from itself, so to speak, and is destroyed rather than.
Yeah. Yeah, it does look as if they used in sorry, I don't know why it does this. What I call the PTS dictionary into shared screen often starts off with a quarter of a page or less. Loss, want, expense, and decay. So yeah, so going apart rather than going away. You're right. For falling apart. Vaya dhamma sankhara. Compounded things are of the nature to vaya, to fall apart.
I mean, if they just went away, that would give us the sense that we might get them back again. But of course, we never do.
That's right. Yeah, they're kind of, they're. I mean, this is vaya dhamma sankhara. You could, I remember the first time I heard, there's a 60 years ago, this wonderful sonorous translation of it. Impermanent are all conditioned things. That's the sonorous grand translation of it. But you could equally correctly, you could translate it as that has been put together is to come to bits again. So that that's an equally correct translation of Vaya Dhamma Sankhara. But thank you for that, Simon. So yeah, we do see actually a difference in usage between vigata and vaya. Vigata, departing, going away, vaya, going apart, something coming apart, falling apart. Though interestingly, it's also used to mean your outgoings. In modern English, we use the outgoings and the expenditures expenditures of money that you incur. It also has that exact same meaning in Sanskrit and Pali. And even in modern Hindi, vyay means your expenditures, your outgoings, or literally awaygoings, money that goes away from you.
Even that though could mean the kind of destruction of your stock or capital, couldn't it? That your capital is breaking up and being dissipated.
Okay, let's put my lawyer's hat on. I think we'd have to talk about that as depreciation rather than outgoings. But I do take your point. It's again a dwindling. Okay, I feel slightly pratigasanya, a sense of pushing back against what you've said, Simon. But I do certainly take your point there. But I sense the meaning of the word as flowing out, vyaya, going away from you. So where were we? Yeah. So is there any more comment or query on that verse? Verse of a line, really, not a verse. I'm just going to put this back to where it was. There we are. We've got a couple of minutes for a recitation or two. And the consequence of your being first to join means that you're first in my gallery, or your top left in my gallery. Would you like to give us a recitation of this of the the last one that we've just done?
Try. Eva meva ko bikaway apakate sata.
Sorry, I'll stop you there for a good reason. Resume, but this time with special attention on the doubled consonants. I heard you trying to get away with bikawe and apaka. Bikawe, apaka. Okay, start again then.
Over. Eva meva ko bikawe apaka te sata ye labanti tatagata pa veditam.
I'm being quite strict now.
Okay,
there was a double
right.
P.
Yeah. Tatagata pa veditam.
Okay, very good.
Dhamma vinayam savanaya atako eteva satta bahutara yena labanti tatagata pa veditam dhamma vinayam savanaya.
Well done. And I'm sure you saw the look on my face when you said etava. So you immediately correctly got it quite right. Eteva. Excellent. Very good. Okay, thank you, Anne. Judith, would you like to come in and give us a recitation of this line?
I can try, yes. Evem eva ko bikavawe apaka apakate sata ye labanti tatagata papavetitam dhamma vinayam savanaya atakuete va sata bahutara yena labanti tatagata papavitam dhamma vinayam savanaya.
Right. Now, Judith, there's an interesting phenomenon that I know you can do it, because regularly, when I've repeated it, you've actually repeated it very accurately after me. So say, just phrase by phrase, evam eva ko bikawe.
Evam eva ko bikawe.
You see, now that was much better than the first time round. Apakate sata.
Apakate sata.
Double that P more. Apaka.
Apakate sata.
Okay, that was good. Not only was it correctly doubled, but you managed to pronounce it without the aspiration of it, the h sound after that we would normally do in English. So apaka. That was dead right.
Apaka.
You see, now the way you said it then, you could have been straight from the Ganges Valley. That came out beautifully. The ye labhanti tatagata pavedetang dhamma vinayang savanaya.
Sorry, where are we starting from?
So you say, oh, let's cut it down a bit. Ye labhanti.
Ye labhanti.
Ye labhanti.
Ye labanti.
Okay, right. Tatagata paveditam.
Tatagata paveditam.
Excellent. Dhamma vinayam savanaya.
Dhavam vinayam savanaya.
Excellent. You see? Coming out really nicely now. Atako eteva sata bahutara.
Atako eteva sata bahutara.
Yeah. Bahutara.
Utara.
Ye nalabhanti.
Ye nalabhanti.
Tathagata paveditam.
Tathagata paveditam.
Dhamma vinayam savanaya.
Dhammam vinayam savanaya.
Yeah, you've done it again, Judith, you see. The first time, you might have been reciting something almost in English. The second time round, very close to the authentic Ganges Valley pronunciation. Thank you, Judith. I'll stop tormenting you now. Thank you. The only reason I do it, Judith, is because I know you can do it, and you respond so well to the individual words as they're said. So we've just gone beyond 5:15 now. So we'll wind up here, and hope to see you again next time round. Okay. Oh, should we chant our blessing as usual?
Yeah.
Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba buddhanubhavena sada suti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba dhammanubhavena sada suti bhavantu te. Bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba sanghanu bhavena sada suti bhavantu te. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Okay, thank you all then. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks then.
Next time.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.